light on the lies. What I find is a play on a stage, controlling minds like a hive. And when I shine a light on the lies, what I find is a play on a stage, controlling minds like a hive. When I was young, I believed what they told me.
Hi, my name is Jamie Powell, and I want to welcome you to this 12-part series called Tending the Threshold. This series was inspired by the current events going on locally and nationally and globally. And today I also want to welcome my co-host. This is Holly Trular. And Holly, would you be willing to speak just for a moment to the current events and this era and what we're facing right now?
Sure. One of the things that feels most important to me in this moment is to just acknowledge that I'm an occupier and settler of this land, as most of the people here. And so this is traditionally Takilma and Shasta territory, and we're coming from what is so-called Ashland, Oregon. So I think that speaks a little bit to the times we're in, which is pretty embedded in a colonialist mindset, certainly in the United States and also globally at this point. And then really just looking at the era that we're inhabiting, which some people call the Anthropocene, some people call it the Great Turning, in which we are living in accelerated times where we're seeing ecocide, political disruption, late-stage capitalism, widespread violence. And I think we'll get into a lot more of these topics as we go forward, but really I think a piece of what we're doing here is trying to invite people into the largest conversation of our species and the largest conversation of our times.
Thank you so much for speaking to what's current, what's real. And for me, I want to say that for the most part of my adult life, I've been a yoga teacher and a massage therapist, and then I felt the call to go to Standing Rock in 2016, and going to Standing Rock really shifted my perspective and opened my eyes. And at that time I saw, with the election and with all that was going on, a real need for people to stand up and speak up for what they believe in and for creating the world that we were wanting to inhabit. And so that brings me to just how excited and delighted I felt personally in meeting you and learning a little bit about the work that you do and the model that you have received as you've been doing this work that really speaks to different ways to respond to all that's going on. And so would you be willing to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm curious sort of what pieces you want me to talk about, but we can sort of flesh that out a little bit. And I also want to do a little bit deeper of an introduction so people kind of know who you are and I am. And so one of the questions I like to explore a lot is, what identities do you lead with? And I'm happy to answer that myself too, but I'm curious, Jamie. And I know a little bit, and I too, I mean, likewise, I really appreciate the work you're doing in the world. And then I'm curious, like, what identities do you lead with as you're doing this work?
Yeah, I want to just appreciate you for asking that question. And given the times that we're in, for me, it has become unbearable to not answer these questions, to not really take a look and go, who am I in this world? And so one of the first identities is being a white woman, being a woman of privilege, being a upper middle class woman. I'm a yoga teacher and a massage therapist. I'm a community activist. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. And I'm a social artist and performer. So those are the identities that first come up when I really look at my positioning and my place in the world right now.
Yeah, well, I love that. I really appreciate you sharing all of that. It helps me to get to know where you're coming from. And in answering that question, I would say the identities that I lead with are somewhat similar. I identify as a white woman and somebody who is cis and able-bodied, mostly hetero. I definitely see that I have a large place of privilege. I am fairly educated. I have a doctorate and a master's degree. And so it's important to me to really recognize where I have dominant identities and then also see that I am a woman in patriarchy. And so there's an oppressed identity in there for me. And I also see myself as a sister and a friend and a community organizer. And I guess the last piece is I am a lawyer. I have a law degree. And then I also was trained as a transpersonal therapist, and I specifically do grief therapy right now.
Yeah. And that's the piece with the work that you've done around developing yourself as a grief therapist and as a lawyer that I find so fascinating. I was able to teach a class called Resilience and Resistance Training, and in that class it was inspired by my time at Standing Rock and by kind of seeing what can I bring to my own community, specifically this area. Ashland is a very white dominant area, and how to get people talking about what's going on. And some of the phenomenon that I saw was either people responding to what's going on in the world by bypassing it, or by really wringing themselves out by being as active as they could, making phone calls, some people for the first time, really going at activism for the first time. And so that brings me to the model that we're here to discuss today. And so would you be willing to share with our audience this model that you have, the raw model?
Yeah, absolutely. So I call the model radical attunement work, and the radical piece is just really getting at the root and also looking at the revolutionary aspect of it, how we can change things by enacting this model. And then attunement being really like the quality of attention that I can give to something. And then work being that I'm showing up and doing this again and again. And so call it radical attunement work, or RAW for short. And it has 4 phases, which we'll walk through a little bit later. But basically, the first is acknowledgement. The second is awareness. And awareness includes analysis. So it's both emotional awareness and also analysis on a few different levels: historical analysis, political analysis. And then from there, it moves into activation or activism. And then the last phase is ascension or expansion. And the way that this was created is that I was working with clients and I saw 2 things happening, which you were describing a little bit earlier. One was I would work with clients that I was working with a lot of people who were activists of some sort. It could be lawyers, it could be on the ground activists, people who were just aware of what was going on to a certain degree and wanting to respond to it. And I saw them really bouncing between the first and the third phase. So acknowledgement, information, stuff like that, and then moving into activation from there, but not having built emotional awareness and or doing an analysis. A lot of newer activists tend to go straight from, ooh, something's wrong and I don't like this, be that Trump, let's say. Some people go from there to then, okay, now I'm going to go send these letters, or now I'm going to go march, but there isn't the awareness piece built into it, and so they end up getting burnt out, or they end up perpetuating violence that they don't know about, or reinventing the wheel. And then I was also working with what I call now spiritualists, but there's a few different terms we could use. And it was people who were really interested in doing personal process work or spiritual work, and I saw them really bouncing between phases 2 and 4, which are building awareness, really looking at what was happening in their bodies or in their lives, and then either just kind of hanging out there, not doing anything on the sociological realm or not sort of honoring the human incarnation we're in. So they might hang out there, or they would bounce to 4. So that would be the sort of spiritual ascension or expansion. And so then they would essentially the word you used was bypass, and just sort of say something like, oh, but we're all one, or but I'm not attached. And there was no right action being taken.
Yeah.
And so it became problematic. And so the model really was dreamt through me in a way, and with the work I was doing with clients. And I just started to see that people liked to hang out in one or two phases, and that was causing a lot of issues for people and the community. And so I was asking questions like, what does it mean to be a mature human being in these times? And then this was developed. Yeah.
Yeah. And before we met, I would often think about the kind of the vertical and the horizontal, and just the either people kind of going up and out, or going straight ahead. But the combination of all of these is what really fascinates me. And so before we go deeper into the different phases, today we are really grateful and honored to have Desiree Cotino join us to deliver a message through a spoken word poem called Heart to a Feather. So we'll take a moment to really breathe and hear and receive these words from Desiree.
How do you weigh a heart to a feather when we live in a world like this? How do you trust that people get better when progress and power grow like a cancer? Wealth and glamour, a slanted story, a world where men build towers to worship their money but turn the working class into a culture of dummies. Because they sold us tickets to a ball game and a white picket fence. They sold our freedom in the name of defense. They sold our future to a few rich men. What does a guilty person look like anyway? Because I think we're in this ship together, so how do you weigh a heart to a feather? With a broken ode? A heavy load? Gold scales, loose brakes. Sorry, I left my nuclear waste in your basement. I'd like to blame the establishment, but it's my mess too. True, time is a patient teacher. She knows that human beings will make their choices. She knows that death is voiceless, but it will be those voices that rouse us from our sleeping. Ancestors who bring us to the very edge of the dreaming, the space between me and the problem. I'll tell you, somewhere far, a city has fallen. Tears are shedding for children. Men feel righteous for what they have done. Somewhere the sun is setting. A heart is telling the story of resistance again. Easy transgressions, we've buried our confessions under a concrete path because we live in the aftermath of war stories told in photographs. My will watches from the mountaintop, bombs drop, chemical attacks, makeshift shack where a family lives. Seated skies, melting ice, another headline to remind us, but the earth, she defies us with her silence. The sweat of death, a war for peace, fright in the eyes of an innocent. I'll take one more chance, please. I'll be in the dusty temple on my knees while the president tweets his success. I'll be praying on how they keep dirty hands so clean. Make an industry of ignorance. Keep the majority indifferent. Make war civil. Keep them out of our homes, adorned with wrong and right, a beast with an appetite to suffer. I've been asking the mother why, but she's quiet most of the time, and I don't blame her when it feels like nothing has changed. But maybe she'll teach me how to hold this anxious rage, let go these lead weights, because some days I feel like my hands are tied and I'm half blind, guessing at reasons why God would leave us in a mess like this. She reminds us with tenderness and weeping willows, rose hips collected in a jar, that my blessings travel somewhere far, that I can make a tonic with my loving. I can pray for ease, to disarm the disease, set down my weary doubt, be the seed that survives the drought. Serpents sleep at the base of your spine. They contemplate the changing skies. Time to wake now, come alive. Weigh your heart to a feather, tether it to love. Remember how to let your soft-bodied creature crawl. Remember how to land and how to fall. She begs us to be still, the mother she knows. To remember our forgetting is the antidote. She says, speak the word. I say it's been spoken. She says, tell the truth. I say, I think the truth is broken. She says, well, be brave then. Be steady. Let your heart be heavy. Be green shoots in spring rising from the murky depths. To let go your fear, let the darkness be felt. Let your heart be well. Be a dragon, breathing prayers. Because somewhere far, somewhere near, somewhere right here, there's something unfair.
So thank you for taking a moment to really take the words of Desiree Coutinho in. And on the next episode, we'll be meeting Desiree in a more intimate way. The next episode will go more deeply into this model on a collective level. But for now, we're going to delve into how this model can be used on a personal level, an individual level. So Holly, will you take us through and take me through kind of, how I could use this model for my own personal work as I'm dealing with all the things that are going on in the world and really learning to regulate my own nervous system and also to move through some big feelings that I might be experiencing or I might experience in the community here.
Sure. First, I just want to say I love Desiree so much and the spoken word she does, and I just so appreciate being able to be here with her and you, and I appreciate having that poem right now, and I want to use it a little bit, some of what was in there, and walk through the model with you using the way that maybe you were impacted by that poem or even just a piece of the poem. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious how hearing Desiree speak those words impacted you.
Well, I notice kind of a grounding in my body, like a dropping into my heart. I notice that most times, in order to get through my day, I'm moving a little bit more fast to be able to make appointments, to be able to do things. But when I hear a poem like this, a spoken word piece that comes straight from a woman that I care about deeply, it gives me pause. It has me slow down my breathing, and I feel tears come up to the surface. And it really starts to put things into perspective for me of the times that we're living in. So those are the things that I notice. My physical body, my heart, my breathing change a little bit, tears. I'm actually starting to feel some of the effects of what's going on in the world right now through Desiree's expression.
Yeah, so if I was walking through the model with you, and like as your friend, the acknowledgement phase for me would be to say, wow, I see that you're impacted by this. I see some tears forming in your eyes, and I see that this means a lot to you. And that would be basic acknowledgement, is just, I see this, or I hear this, some kind of small piece of information. And sometimes that's all we have time to do with someone. And so then from there, if there's time, we can move into the awareness phase, which you started a little bit. You were sharing a lot about what was going on in your body. But for me, as I'm attuning to you in this moment, I might ask you, tell me a little bit more about how this is impacting you. What does it mean for you to feel grounded in this moment?
Yeah, well, some of the details from the poem, nuclear waste in the basement, it takes me to a moment in my own being of truth telling. And the truth for me, hearing the truth of what's actually going on in the world, I feel actually a relaxation in my nervous system when I see a woman telling the truth about what's going on in the world, So that's what I'm aware of.
Yeah. So I appreciate that piece in the awareness phase, especially when it's a one-on-one relationship, or we're calling it the personal right now, of just building curiosity and really delving deeper into how it impacts you. And so for me, if I'm building awareness around my own experience during this, I would say I feel more connected to you as you're sharing. I too feel a sense of relief, and I also feel deep grief when I hear those words for her. And if we had more time, we could go further into that grief, if that's what felt most up for us. But there is an aspect in the awareness phase of really moving into the underworld a bit. And when we get into the political or collective piece, we can talk a bit about more analysis. But here, it's really delving into sometimes uncomfortable material. It can also be delving into joy, but just building that emotional awareness. Yeah. So from that place, we would then move into activation, which in a personal relationship might mean what I think you might need. But it could also be me asking you, like hearing how this has impacted you, Jamie. What do you need right now? How can I be in right action with you? So just a question about needs for you.
Yeah, there's a need to contribute. There's a need to know what I can do. Desiree's expression of rage, expression of that depth of emotion stirs it within me, and then the need that comes forward is like, what can I do? So a need to contribute. And so for me as a friend, it might be helpful to meet and have tea and talk about like what's going on locally, or if there's any groups that are already activated, or if there's any information that I need to know about these particular issues. So contribution and to matter, to be able to make a difference.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So for me, if I was walking through the model specifically and attuning to you in this moment, it would be, okay, do you want to go get tea now? Or can we set that up on the calendar? Sometimes it could be the activation phase in a personal relationship. Could be, oh, it looks like this person needs a hug, right? And that's the activation piece. Or maybe this person needs more space, and that's an activation piece. And so then moving from that place of activation, we would go into expansion or ascension, which often happens naturally. Like if I'm truly attuning to you, slowing down and taking the time, then often we're going to naturally feel more connected. And so then we're going to feel a greater sense of self, in that my self is interwoven with your self. Or you were even saying that you felt the need to contribute and possibly more connected to Desiree. So I'm curious how you feel moving into, if you feel ready to, or how you feel moving into that expansion phase.
Yeah, I think Desiree's expression gives me a sense of compassion for what she's going through, and that feels more expansive. And then your listening right? You're my friend who's actually paying attention to me and listening and asking. And then I feel a sense of connection and less loneliness and isolation as a result of going through this process. So would that be considered ascension?
Yeah, absolutely. I often will also call it expansion, just that we feel larger. And so then once we've reached that phase, we can move into a greater sense of being able to acknowledge more and hold more. So yeah, I appreciate everything that you're sharing as we're walking through this model on a more personal level.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So when, for me, another sort of place of need in that realm of contribution is to be able to, make a difference in the community. And when I find out that there's things to do like that, I think of art and I think of expression and I think of creating different avenues for artists like Desiree to be able to express. So I'm really grateful for you and also for Desiree today for coming and creating this show and this series with me. And so thank you very much.
Yeah.
And would you be willing to close us out?
Absolutely. I just appreciate this opportunity as well. I always enjoy spending time with you, and I really want to also thank Wanda Borland, who's the producer, and really excited for the next episode where we'll be delving a little bit more into this model and talking about how we can use it to attune to what's going on politically or collectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
When I was young, I believed what they told me. And when I was young, they really tried to mold me. But then somehow I knew it wasn't true. They were confused. I had a clue within my soul that led me to a higher truth. But then somehow I knew it wasn't true. I was confused, I had a clue within my soul that led me to a higher truth. When I was young, I was told the greatest story.